Irache. We are going to start. We are waiting for Juliana, but she joins us a little bit later. So it's my pleasure to thank you. Gracias a todos y a todas por estarem juntos neste debate tão importante sobre mulheres na América Latina e na Europa e o impacto do COVID e os direitos das mulheres. Thank you very much to all of you for participating in this debate, and gracias Irache por tu participación y por el apoyo de nuestro grupo en la organización de este debate. La palabra es tuya por abrir los trabajos.
Muchas gracias, María Manuel, y gracias a los compañeros y las compañeras que me habéis trasladado la invitación a participar en este encuentro que sin duda alguna tiene una perspectiva muy importante para nosotros como socialdemócratas y para nosotras también como feministas, y es la perspectiva de género en un momento en el que nos encontramos con una pandemia global que está atacando en todos los territorios y que sin duda alguna estamos siendo muy conscientes de cómo está atacando a sectores más vulnerables y por lo tanto también hay una perspectiva de género en todo lo que tiene que ver con la pandemia de la COVID-19. La semana pasada celebramos el 25 aniversario de la Declaración de Beijing, un plan integral para lograr la igualdad entre hombres y mujeres que identificaba 12 áreas de interés interrelacionadas en las que se necesitaba una acción vigente, ¿no? Y es la economía, los derechos de las niñas, la violencia contra las mujeres, el medio ambiente. Y 25 años después podemos decir que la Declaración de Beijing sigue siendo el referente en cuestiones de igualdad de género a nivel mundial. Este año también celebramos el 5º aniversario de la adopción de los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible, que incluyen un objetivo específicamente dedicado a lograr la igualdad de género y empoderar a las mujeres y a las niñas, y que además vincula la igualdad de género al objetivo general de lograr el desarrollo sostenible para todos en el 2030. Sin embargo, a pesar de las buenas intenciones, los avances han sido pequeños y están siendo muy lentos. Y creo que todos somos conscientes de ello. Y lo que es aún peor, el año 2020 ha llegado con una sorpresa inesperada. Nos enfrentamos a una pandemia mundial que está afectando más a las mujeres que a los hombres y amenaza con poner en peligro los avances logrados en materia de igualdad de género en todo el mundo. Naciones Unidas estima que debido a la pandemia 47 millones de mujeres y niñas serán empujadas a la pobreza extrema en 2021, elevándolo a un total de 435 millones de mujeres. La Comisión Económica para América Latina, CEPAL, estima que 30 millones de personas podrían convertirse en pobres y 16 millones de personas podrían entrar en una situación de extrema pobreza. Y creo que sin duda alguna estos datos nos evidencian la necesidad de trabajar para ser capaces, como responsables políticos, de incorporar esa perspectiva de género en todas las actuaciones y en todas las políticas que estamos llevando a cabo en estos momentos de cara a poder responder ante la pandemia. La crisis del COVID-19 está teniendo un gran impacto, como os digo, en las mujeres. Están en la primera línea de la pandemia, ya que son en gran mayoría en el sistema de salud y atención de las personas mayores y también en el sector minorista, trabajadoras de supermercados, de pequeños comercios, y además también se verán muy afectadas en el aspecto económico, ya que tienen menores salarios que los hombres y además hay una parte muy importante de lo que es el empleo sin regulación, es decir, el empleo sin contratos que afecta en muchas ocasiones a las mujeres, sobre todo en el servicio doméstico, y que por lo tanto todas las medidas que se están poniendo en marcha para apoyar los seguros de desempleo a las personas que se ven afectadas por la pandemia, pues realmente no llegan a todas estas mujeres que están trabajando, como digo, en el sector no regulado, sin contratos, y por lo tanto no pueden tener estos beneficios que se están buscando para la clase trabajadora en general. Mañana, el 4 de noviembre, celebramos en la Unión Europea el Día por la Igualdad Salarial, día que marca simbólicamente el momento a partir del cual las mujeres trabajan gratis en relación con los hombres en un año. Es decir, a partir del 4 de noviembre hasta el 31 de diciembre es como si las mujeres estuvieran trabajando gratis, no están recibiendo salarios si lo comparamos con la brecha salarial que existe, ¿no? Y yo creo que este es un dato muy significativo y que también nos evidencia cuestiones sobre las que tenemos que trabajar. Muchas mujeres perderán sus trabajos, sus puestos de trabajo, y la experiencia de crisis anteriores muestra que el trabajo de los hombres se recupera más rápido y antes que el de las mujeres. Los datos que tenemos indican, por ejemplo, que en América Latina más de la mitad de las mujeres están empleadas en sectores con mayor riesgo de contracción económica. Las estadísticas predicen un aumento de casi el 6% de la tasa del desempleo femenino en comparación con el 2019, y la Comisión Económica para América Latina propuso recientemente un ingreso básico de emergencia para hacer frente a los efectos socioeconómicos de la crisis provocada por el coronavirus. Propone que los gobiernos aseguren transferencias monetarias temporales inmediatas para satisfacer las necesidades básicas y sostener el consumo de los hogares. Y además, a largo plazo también se reitera que estas transferencias deben de ser permanentes. También en la Unión Europea nos encontramos con situaciones similares y, de hecho, ahora mismo en Europa estamos debatiendo sobre esta iniciativa de la renta básica universal para la ciudadanía. No es una renta exclusiva para las mujeres, es la renta, el ingreso mínimo para la ciudadanía, y que en casos, por ejemplo, como en España, como en mi país en concreto, se ha puesto en marcha recientemente. Es verdad que ya estaba dentro del programa de trabajo del Gobierno de España, pero se ha acelerado en los tiempos su puesta en marcha por la situación del COVID. Y sin duda alguna, iniciativas de este tipo vienen a apoyar, como digo, a los sectores más vulnerables, que en muchos de estos casos son las mujeres. Y otro grave problema al que debemos hacer frente en estos momentos es la violencia de género. Los casos de violencia contra las mujeres han aumentado significativamente durante los confinamientos que han decretado muchos países, ya que las mujeres se han visto obligadas a quedarse en casa con sus maltratadores. Realmente este dato me parece bastante crudo, ¿no? Lo que muestra la realidad en la que muchas mujeres se han visto sometidas sin ninguna opción de tener que vivir dentro de sus propias casas con sus maltratadores. Y por lo tanto, esta es una cuestión sobre la cual también tenemos que trabajar. Justo antes de que estallara la pandemia, tuve la ocasión, por ejemplo, de estar en México y de estar en Cuba, y el tema de los feminicidios fue un elemento también de debate que planteamos, porque sin duda alguna es una realidad que se vive en todo el mundo, porque parte de la base de una desigualdad estructural en la sociedad, y por lo tanto nadie está libre de esta situación de la violencia de género. Y también creo que debemos de hacer uso de este tipo de instrumentos y de cooperación parlamentaria para poder intercambiar distintos puntos de vista con respecto a políticas que se están poniendo en marcha de cara a poder favorecer su implantación en otros lugares. El acceso a los servicios de salud, en particular a la salud sexual y reproductiva, también se ha visto gravemente afectada, lo que puede ocasionar secuelas físicas y psíquicas en muchas mujeres, e incluso la muerte en casos que son mucho más graves, ¿no? Y otro elemento importante también que no podemos perder de vista es la educación. La educación se ha visto duramente golpeada durante la crisis, y una vez más las niñas de las familias más pobres serán las grandes perdedoras. La UNESCO denuncia que 11 millones de niñas en todo el mundo podrían no volver a la escuela este año debido a la interrupción de la educación provocada por la COVID-19. Esta situación no solo amenaza décadas de progreso hacia la igualdad de género, sino que también pone a las niñas de todo el mundo en riesgo de embarazos adolescentes, matrimonios forzados y de violencia. Por lo tanto, es un elemento sobre el cual tenemos también, insisto, que trabajar. Es esencial la recolección de datos desagregados por género para poder realizar una correcta evaluación de la situación post-COVID y de la implantación de las políticas públicas. Debemos mejorar la participación de las mujeres en la toma de decisiones y representación tanto en la vida pública como en la privada. Eso es un elemento en el cual hemos insistido en muchas ocasiones, y creo que ya es una sensación o una reclamación muy generalizada por todo el movimiento feminista y por todo el movimiento progresista de los partidos progresistas, que es la participación igualitaria de las mujeres, porque no podemos dejar que las decisiones que afectan a nuestras vidas se tomen sin que nosotras seamos partícipes. Por lo tanto, cualquier iniciativa que vaya dirigida a fomentar y a motivar la participación de las mujeres en todas las esferas de lo político, de lo social, del trabajo, de lo económico, son elementos fundamentales sobre los cuales tenemos que trabajar. Y debemos asegurar también la atención de las necesidades inmediatas de las mujeres que trabajan en el sector sanitario, que son el pilar de la lucha contra la pandemia. Es necesario promover estrategias específicas de empoderamiento de mujeres que trabajan en el sector sanitario, y también ser capaces de apoyar el fortalecimiento de nuestros sistemas públicos de sanidad, porque sin duda alguna será un elemento que favorezca el poder estar preparados para futuras posibles la que nos ha dado en este caso. Esta configuración se podría exportar a las relaciones bilaterales también entre la Unión Europea y América Latina, instaurando reuniones ministeriales entre la UE y el CELAC de responsables de políticas de género y grupos de trabajo específicos de seguimiento para la implementación de las políticas que tengan en cuenta la perspectiva de género. Estas son algunas ideas que lanzo para iniciar el debate. Voy a terminar porque creo que tenemos un gran número de compañeros y compañeras que van a participar en este encuentro, insistiendo en el agradecimiento, María Manuel, de haberme invitado a participar en este acto. Muchas gracias.
Por teres participado y por todo lo que nos ha dicho, y muy importante. Nosotros queremos en las delegaciones también siempre introducir esta perspectiva del impacto del género para luchar en conjunto y definir en conjunto las políticas. Now we're going to move to the first panel on economic empowerment, impact on unpaid care and informal sector. And I give the floor to Javi Lopez, our co-chair of Eurolat, that will be the coordinator. And thank you, gracias, Javi, por tu participación. The floor is yours.
Gracias, María Manuel. Thank you very much. I will continue in English because also we have guests that they are waiting for mix our languages. My modest contribution here is the moderation of the first panel. We have two incredible guests for the discussion. We will have set 7-8 minutes per intervention, but then we will have 20 minutes with questions, suggestions, comments, and open floor. The first speaker is Evelyn Regner, who is the chairwoman of the Committee on Women's Rights and Equality here in the European Parliament, extremely experienced member of the European Parliament, and also an important voice in Eurolat as a member of the Euro-Latin American Assembly, not only this term, also the last mandate. She has long experience defending workers' rights in the ETUC, in the European Trade Unions, also in the European Economic and Social Committee, and running the European office in Brussels of the OGB. Thank you very much for accept the invitation. The floor is yours, Evelyn.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Javi, for these nice introductory words, and thanks to Maria Manuel, and also, of course, to Irache, that we have the opportunity to debate on this issue tonight. So my approach is always this one. We are, as feminists, social democratic feminists in the European Union, when cooperating with Latin American colleagues, with Latin Americans, especially with women, I always feel very familiar. I think we are sharing so much. And therefore, I think occasions like this are always really a precious occasion to learn from each other, because for me, it's all the time when going to Latin America and to have the occasion to do it also remote like now, that I take a lot on board. And I did it already in the past quite many times, because from my point of view, Latin American women are so courageous, and it's really fantastic. So straight going to the topic. I don't want to blah blah around. The topic really says it already. Unpaid care. What is care? Care is work. And this is so important, just to stay that straightforward. You have the care work that is done at home by the women who are caring about the kids, about the elderly, and I got to know a lot that it's in Latin American situations and households even worse. And of course, it's the same way, a huge issue with us. So elderly, kids, the sick one. And there it's, of course, I mean, like it's everywhere, always expected that women are doing the story. That's them. And of course, in order to overcome the gender pay gap, to be self-confident, of course, if you have somebody waiting at home and you have to do all the job, how can you be politically engaged? How can you do networking with other women? How can you do that? So somehow this is really a huge problem. But I don't want to describe so much only the situation, because we always should talk and debate on the solutions. And COVID is sharpening inequalities. We just see that all the work that hasn't been done before somehow becomes enormously big. So carrying computer, children, cooking, all this at home or not, somehow is doubled and tripled with COVID-19. I learned from Latin America as pioneer of the Global South in the endeavor to introduce the so-called public care system. So I was really very pleased that Uruguay has really a leading position, and that a lot should be done at the public area to have care services and infrastructure. But because that I don't want to describe so much what is not working, because we know that there is a lot not working. There's not the appreciation of the care work globally for done, and therefore somehow not paying and not giving social insurance and all that. I would really like to come to a proposal for the future, how to tackle this incredible situation right now with COVID, where women are confronted with this enormous amount of additional care work. There is the following thing. We have this global need of care. We simply have that. We know all that. People are getting older, getting more sick and all that. So there is this need for care and nursing. New jobs can be created there, and which would benefit women in particular. If states invest in preschool education or long-term care, women's chances in the labor market increase. And therefore, just a couple of figures. Investing in care would create 2.7 times as many jobs as, for example, the same investment in construction. We know right now with COVID, we need a boost for the economy, we need a boost for the climate, we need a boost for women, and of course also to raise the employment rate. And when we can say 6.3 as many for many and 10% more for men in jobs, this could be really a good thing. Increasing the numbers working in care to 10% of the employed population, as it is example in Sweden and in Denmark, does mean, okay, it's good for well-being, it's good for the self-confidence of women, it's good for the economy, and gives all care workers a pay rise to the real living wage, would create 2 million jobs. 2 million jobs, increasing overall employment rates by 5% points and decreasing the gender employment gap by 4% points. And now I'm talking about the European Union. So if this is something that is good for the European Union, it should be really something that should be taken for the G8, G20, for OECD, and of course for Latin American women as well. 50% more can be recouped by the Treasury in the direct and indirect tax revenue from investment in care than in construction. And invest in care is also greener than, for example, investing in construction, producing 30% less greenhouse gas emissions. I know I just started right now throwing it like this on the table, but I really wanted, with my input, start already with a proposal for a solution and stop right here.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. We will give the floor for the next speaker, who is Juliana Cardoso, who is member of Movimientos Sociais and consigliere of the city of Sao Paulo. We are glad that you are here. You are working in the third term in the city council, a strong voice defending the mandate of popular struggles on the working class. Also, she was a strong voice defending human rights, women, humanized childbirth, public services, housing, social assistance, LGBTQI, immigrants, street people, children, a long list of good causes and reasons and arguments, and we're really happy that you joined this panel. Thank you very much. Oh, maybe we don't have Juliana with us. No, we have Juliana with us. Obrigado.
No speak English.
Muchas gracias.
Posso...
Juliana pode falar em português. Juliana pode falar em português pausado.
Certo. Já é a minha fala, é isso? Ok.
A palavra é tua.
Obrigada, né, a todos. Eu tô nervosa porque eu não falo inglês, mas eu vou tentar falar devagar para a gente poder se entender aqui, tá bom? Boa noite a todos e a todas. Aqui no Brasil é boa tarde. Eu quero agradecer o convite dos membros do grupo dos socialistas e democratas no Parlamento Europeu para falar em tão importante encontro sobre o tema tão urgente para nós, brasileiras e brasileiros, que é o impacto da pandemia do Covid-19 sobre as mulheres. Começo saudando o eurodeputado Javi Lopes e a eurodeputada Evelyn Regner. Espero que eu tenha traduzido certo. Estamos falando da maior crise sanitária, econômica e social da nossa história recente, que no Brasil vem impactando de maneira mais forte nas mulheres, os negros, as comunidades quilombolas e a população indígena, na qual eu sou descendente. A minha etnia é terena, do Mato Grosso do Sul. Nenhum desses impactos, como o aumento da violência contra as mulheres, a sobrecarga de trabalho doméstico e de cuidado sobre as mulheres, o aumento do desemprego, da precarização e informalização do trabalho, principalmente sobre as mulheres, em especial as mulheres negras, eram esperados. Esses impactos não se devem à natureza do vírus em si, mas à combinação perversa entre esses ainda pouco conhecida doença, mas sim as desigualdades estruturais do nosso país e que um governo que, ao mesmo tempo que nega a sua gravidade da doença, politiza todo ou qualquer iniciativa para enfrentá-la e aproveita o momento para aprofundar sua política de ataque às conquistas sociais e mercantilização dos nossos direitos. A privatização de empresas estratégicas e flexibilização da nossa política ambiental, permitindo, por exemplo, a queimada das Amazônias e do Pantanal, para benefício da produção agropecuária e da mineração. Não havia dúvidas de que a pandemia produzia efeitos perversos, mas no Brasil sofremos também um governo irresponsável, insensível com a dor das pessoas, que nega a gravidade da doença, que defende a tortura, o serviço e está a serviço de um projeto ultra neoliberal de entrega do país. O maior ato político do Brasil, atualmente, aqui é ser a favor da vida. E o que deveria ser inquestionável por qualquer ser humano e por qualquer governante. Mas, infelizmente, nós temos mais de 160 mil mortos do Covid-19. Precisamos reafirmar o seu valor até o momento. Aqui, quero, junto com vocês, homenagear e prestar a minha solidariedade aos mortos e familiares das pessoas que tiveram o Covid-19. Sendo, aqui no Brasil, campeão de mortes de grávidas e de mulheres que acabaram de ter os seus filhos, com 77% dos casos no mundo. Precisamos reafirmar o valor da vida e o valor das políticas públicas, em especial o nosso Sistema Único de Saúde, que assegurou que não tivéssemos ainda mais mortes pelo atendimento qualificado e humanizado das trabalhadoras e trabalhadores do SUS. Após a luta das organizações sociais, movimentos e partidos de oposição, com forte atuação no parlamento pelo meu partido, o Partido dos Trabalhadores, e outros partidos de esquerda, conseguimos que o governo fizesse um auxílio emergencial de R$600 para a população que ficou desempregada e sem fonte de renda por causa da pandemia. Mas nem todos que precisavam conseguiram, e é importante dizer, conseguiram receber. E é importante dizer que o senhor presidente da República, Jair Bolsonaro, não estava querendo autorizar esse auxílio para a população. Foi com muita mobilização popular para que esse recurso, junto com o parlamento, fosse aprovado e ser repassado para esses familiares. Importante lembrar que a eleição do atual aqui do Brasil foi mais etapa do golpe que começou com a deposição da nossa presidente. Acusações contra nosso presidente Lula, que assim levaram e o prenderam por ações que infundadas e que, infelizmente, a justiça assim assegurou que ele fosse preso. Mesmo assim, os movimentos sociais, em especial a de mulheres e feministas, seguiram firmes na luta em prós aos direitos, ocupando as ruas. A solidariedade entre os vulneráveis, as pessoas sem acesso ao direito à política pública, se mostrou de maneira muito forte durante a pandemia e o isolamento social. Posso garantir, sem dúvida, que foi a solidariedade do povo brasileiro que assegurou, no início da pandemia, que muita gente não morresse de fome ou de Covid. Segundo o monitor da violência, houve queda nos registros oficiais de violência doméstica, estupros e estupros de vulneráveis. Por outro lado, os casos de assassinato de mulheres e de feminicídio aumentaram. O que isso indica? Que não houve queda de casos, mas o aumento de subnotificação em função da quarentena. Se a agressão doméstica pode ficar invisível, dificultada, o assassinato não pode. No começo da quarentena, eu, como vereadora, na bancada do Partido dos Trabalhadores, apresentei algumas recomendações a serem adotadas de imediato pela Prefeitura Municipal, pela Prefeitura Municipal de São Paulo, onde sou vereadora. A garantia do auxílio de mulheres em situação de violência, abertura e ampliação dos espaços de acolhidas e divulgação dos programas de proteção. Segundo os dados do Instituto Brasileiro de Geografia e Estatística, o IBGE, os números de mulheres que são responsáveis financeiramente pelas famílias crescem a cada ano. Quase metade das casas brasileiras são chefiadas por mulheres, inclusive mulheres que moram com companheiros. Em algumas famílias, nesse momento, são a única fonte de renda, mesmo fazendo faxinas e, mais uma vez, se expondo ao risco que estão longe de serem resolvidos aqui no Brasil. Em 2017, uma deputada do PT, Benedita da Silva, apresentou o projeto da economia do cuidado, também conhecida como PIB da vassoura, para dizer qual o valor de trabalho realizado por mulheres no cuidado de casa, de criança e de idosos. O que já aconteceu na França e no México, e entre outros países. Em 2015, as tarefas domésticas representariam equivalente a 11,3% do PIB do ano. E quero compartilhar com vocês aqui que o nosso governo municipal ele foi omisso em criar mecanismos tecnológicos para as nossas crianças, para que elas pudessem ter acesso ao ano letivo. As famílias desempregadas não têm acesso à internet para o estudo educacional. Agora, importante refletir: como estudar com fome? Como que vamos ajudar as crianças para um futuro melhor se a gente não consegue, com governos de Bruno Covas, estar ajudando e fazendo a política pública para o acolhimento dessas nossas crianças? Isso bate diretamente na vida das famílias e principalmente das mulheres. Nesse momento que o governo que temos, é difícil prever o que acontecerá, como uma economia, claro, abrindo antes do controle da epidemia, sem ter a vacina, enquanto não tivermos consolidado a compreensão de que o Estado tem um papel fundamental no enfrentamento da desigualdade e do regramento do mercado, estaremos suscetíveis. Mas não podemos ficar parados, ainda mais nesse momento. Como vereadora, como mãe, como mulher, faço aqui a minha parte, juntando os parlamentares, movimento social, comunidade, periferia, para que todos os países e outros companheiros e companheiras de oposição, que façamos uma luta para que não retirem os direitos do nosso Estado. Eu entendo que o Estado tem que ser forte, tem que ser intenso, não um Estado mínimo como está querendo ser colocado nesses últimos tempos aqui no Brasil. Quero aqui agradecer e dizer que respeito as mulheres em todos os aspectos. A gente precisa de segurança, a gente precisa de possibilidades de crescimento profissional. Para isso, momentos como esse, de troca de ideias, são fundamentais. Primeiro, para fazer a denúncia daquilo que tem acontecido no Brasil. E segundo, por mais que as nossas realidades tenham muitas diferenças, a semelhança entre nós nos
Juliana, por favor, temos que terminar. Obrigada.
Ok. Então, eu só estava dizendo que a semelhança que nos unem com relação às batalhas das mulheres nos tornam parceiros da busca de soluções para benefícios para toda a humanidade. Muitíssimo obrigada por essa oportunidade de estar aqui com vocês. E seguimos em frente. Força e coragem. Seguimos para ter vida. E chega de tantas mortes. Obrigada.
Muchísimas gracias, Juliana. Ahora pasaríamos al turno de preguntas, sugerencias, comentarios. Yo creo que lo mejor sería agrupar todas, porque estamos muy justos de tiempo, como nos recordaba María Manuel. Entonces, lo que sería más cómodo sería si pudierais, los que quisierais intervenir, utilizar el chat que tenemos en el programa, en el Webex. Si hay algún colega, compañero, veo muchos diputados también conectados. Aquí, diputadas, muchas, si quisieran tomar la palabra, hacer algún comentario sobre este punto, sería fantástico. Also, we have a lot of people that they are not members of the parliament and in the European Parliament, or we have also a lot of MPs and politicians. Okay, I see that we have Mark Angel.
If there are questions to Juliana, I can be the interpreter.
Okay, I see Mark Angel. It will be perfect. Our colleague from Luxembourg, member of the European Parliament and also member of the on the committee.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. Pienso que es mejor que cuando hablo en inglés. Para mí más fácil. So I would like to thank Juliana and also Evelyn for their input. And this subject, we have treated it also in our Employment and Social Affairs Committee last week when we had meetings where a representative of AGE, of the European Institute of Gender Equality, also gave us so many numbers. This is a problem in Europe, but if you look at the ELO numbers, they are exactly the same, and Evelyn gave us already so many numbers. There was two numbers which I kept in my mind and which struck me, that in Europe alone, unpaid care keeps 7.7 million women out of work. So that means 7.7 million do not have income because they have to stay home and do unpaid care work. And this is really a scandal. And if you look at the numbers of ILO, it's the same all over the different continents. And this is really a scandal, and I think we have to move on. But what I wanted to say, Evelyn, you said in the beginning, we have so much in common with our colleagues and comrades in Latin America. There is also some threats we have in common. This whole anti-gender movement, I talk a lot about it, it's very present all over. It's especially the evangelical religion, and then the churches go in competition, who wants to be more conservative, and then politicians follow that. And that has become a very, very big problem. And they are very well connected. I saw that last year, for example, there was a huge transatlantic forum in Colombia, in Latin America, where all these people, Polish speakers, Hungarian speakers, united with Latin American far-right politicians, and they defend their so-called family values, and they want to bring people back in these patriarchal schemes, and for them, unpaid care of women is totally natural. It's not a problem, and this is why I just wanted to say I'm so glad we organized this event here, because also we have to get organized to counter those movements, because we cannot tolerate any backlashes. That was my message, and I wish you good luck, and I'm really happy to be present here. Muchas gracias. Muito obrigado.
Muchas gracias, Marc Ángel, por tus palabras. No sé si alguien más quiere tomar la palabra. Tenemos también muchos colegas, muchas colegas que trabajan en el grupo, trabajan con diputados. Obviamente, si alguien quiere tomar la palabra, estamos encantados. Bueno, sin más, entonces pasaría, digamos, a María Manuel, por si quiere hacer alguna pequeña traducción del comentario de Marc Ángel, y si luego algunas de nuestras compañeras, Evelyn y Juliana, quieren cerrar rápidamente el panel.
Marc Ángel, para Juliana, o Marc sublinhou a importância desta questão, de termos trabalhado juntos na definição de políticas que permitam resolver estas desigualdades que a crise veio agravar, destacando em especial alguns números que a Evelyn nos trouxe aqui, alguns dados tão importantes como aquele de que 7,7 milhões de mulheres estão fora do mercado de trabalho, quero dizer, desempenham tarefas de trabalho não pago na Europa, e sabemos que os números são também impressionantes para a América Latina, sublinhando uma vez mais o nosso esforço, mulheres e homens. É muito bom ter o Marco conosco aqui e outros colegas do Eurolat, o IBAN, o RABI, que estão connosco também aqui a participar nesta sessão. Isto não é uma questão de mulheres, é uma questão de progressistas, de socialistas e democratas. Muito obrigada, Ravi.
Pasaría la palabra, and then I will give the floor. Thank you very much for this translation. I will give the floor to Evelyn. Also, Evelyn has a written question here in the chat. It would be perfect if she could use the intervention to answer these questions. And
yes. Thank you so much, Mark, that you raised this issue. Yes, we really have to do an excellent networking. And whatever is happening right now, and there is so terrible things happening, we are all aware. I simply would like to put out one issue we right now have to face in Europe. And I think that is also something to work better together also with you in Latin America, the question of abortion. I just put it out right now because in Poland there are these hundreds of thousands of women going to the street and are really protesting to very repressive measures coming from the countries and from the government. And of course, all these issues always have one thing in common: make women small, weak, make women staying at home and to obey, and somehow to put them into a corner again with these measures. I just point that out because yes, it's true what you're saying. These things are happening, and they are meeting each other in Colombia with all these church initiatives. But we are united. We are strongly fighting against this too, and therefore I just mention it right now. But because at the end of the week, Irache, our Irache, was the engine to write a letter to this Polish government and put pressure also to EPP and Renew, of course, Greens and the leftist movement was on board. But it was our social democratic leader, Irache, pushing so much the issue. No, here are basic fundamental rights of women touched, and we are united. We protest, and we say the others have to take them on board too. And I think with this, when we say, okay, we don't tolerate it, we can be also quite strong. And I just had already very good talks to Argentinian women on the abortion issue. So I think in this regard, we can really work closely together. I wanted to point out also one thing to the unpaid care issue that is right now on the table as well. I mean, let us remind, and it takes this beautiful title, Lisbon Strategy, of the good old Lisbon Strategy that was drafted so many years ago, where the goal was to erase the employment rate of women by offering employment rate of women, taking them also from the corner where they are pushed to because of being so responsible for all this care work they have to do at home and to deal with children and elderly and sick parents and so on, by offering, by saying, we at the European Union's level have this Barcelona goal. We say at least one third of all the very, very small kids should have also children care. So I think it's really high time to put again all these things that we have been really pushing so much in the past, also to the political landscape again. And this is really something we could do unitedly with you in Sao Paulo, as well as at the other places in Latin America.
Thank you very much, Juliana. Then I will give the floor, Evelyn, sorry, and then I will give the floor to Juliana.
Javi, I think there is a question from Ambassador Sergio Alfaro from Costa Rica and Dima Maculada.
Okay.
2 questions.
Sorry, but as I see, Immaculada wants to take the floor.
The problem is, hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. I have a lot of problems, and then it was continuously breaking on the sound, and then I couldn't send you a message that I really wanted to take the floor. But I'm sorry. No, it was my problem. It was my fault, the connection, not your fault. Well, thank you very much for organizing this webinar. I think it is very, very important, and my suggestion is that it would be important to take this compromise to share together how we can improve the situation of women, particularly after or during COVID and after COVID. I think I am really very, very worried because, as already has been mentioned, women has in a worse condition in order to face the consequences of this huge crisis, health, economic and social crisis, and particularly because women have a more high level of participation in informal economy in Latin American countries. And I would really like to know how, under this condition, women can face under security health conditions their work. If you are in an informal work, it's much more difficult to be able to take all the healthy security conditions. No, then this is one of my first question: how is possible to help women to face these conditions? Secondly, I would like to know if in Latin American countries now there is a real issue in the mass media agenda about the conditions under which women are suffering the consequences of this pandemic. How the social, the civil society, and how the different political groups and the official institutions are dealing with this issue and are trying to take measures in order to combat the situation. And finally, I would really like to know, how do you expect we can help you more, women in Latin America, in order to achieve a more empowerment of their service, of their lives, and on their labor conditions? Do you think that we can't do more from the European Parliament point of view, and from a political point of view from our S&D groups? These are the questions I put on the table, and I'm really sorry because I couldn't make you know that I really wanted to take the floor. Thank you very much.
Well, then we continue. Also, we have this writing question by Sergio Alfaro from Costa Rica. It's for Evelyn also. I don't know if Evelyn will want to answer, and we end with Juliana.
É para complementar agora, é isso?
Perfeito.
Ok. Bom, quando a gente fala sobre...
Juliana, por favor, ser breve. Breve, está bem? Temos pouco tempo. Obrigada.
Ok.
Sí, sería 3 minutos, por favor.
Ok. quando a gente fala sobre a violência das mulheres, a gente fala quando nós temos um estado mínimo, né? Fechamento de serviços, não enxergar a mulher, principalmente no mercado de trabalho. As mulheres negras sempre ficam fora em trabalhos informais, né? Sem carteira registrada. Aqui no Brasil, e em São Paulo em especial, o crescimento da violência das mulheres, ela passou por muitos espaços que não colocou-se orçamento para casas de centro de acolhida. A Casa da Mulher Brasileira demorou 4 anos para ela poder funcionar, e mesmo assim, os serviços que ali foram colocados, que era um sistema para que a mulher pudesse passar uma vez no serviço e ser atendida pela assistência social, polícia militar, guarda civil metropolitana, verificar para onde que ali poderia ter o acolhimento de secretarias como educação, assistência social. Então, falar de mulheres com violência doméstica, violência psicológica, é dizer que nós precisamos ter investimento intenso em orçamento e em políticas públicas para essas mulheres. E a gente não pode passar também sem dizer da violência das mulheres na política. Aqui no Brasil nós somos muito poucas. E a gente, quando tem um compromisso socialista, feminista, nós sofremos muito mais o preconceito e impacto do machismo institucional. Então, essa oportunidade que nós estamos aqui para conversar sobre isso também passa pelas mulheres na política. Então, muito obrigada pela essa participação, e a gente está aqui, se precisar, quando vierem para o Brasil, e passar esse período do Covid-19, podem ter as portas abertas da Câmara Municipal de São Paulo, e eu também levá-las e levá-los a gente ver onde está a realidade das mulheres mais vulneráveis. Muito obrigada.
Sim, Juliana, muito obrigada. Quando pudermos, iremos ao Brasil para poder ver a realidade localmente, que é sempre diferente. Juliana calls our attention to the inequalities, not only be women, but be black women. Is very hard in Brazil, and also cyber violence on women when they are doing politics against women in Brazil, and also the importance of local government in this crisis and before the crisis, supporting women's rights in Brazil, and especially in São Paulo, where she works as a member of the municipality.
Okay, it was extremely interesting, Juliana. Then for close this panel, I will give the floor to Evelyn again, if she could answer the written question that we have in the chat, or comment the INMA's analysis.
Invite all of us to go to Brazil. I forgot the most important.
We'd love to have this exchange also in real world and not remotely. So I'd really love to. I'm looking very much forward to have that either in Brussels, in Europe, or in Latin America, in Brazil. However, sorry, I just had to read the question before, so I just had to look back to the chat. I was just doing all these figures and proposing because in the European Union, we right now have the billions on the table in order to do the reconstruction and the recovery of Europe. And we're just in midst of the second half lockdown, or however we have to call that. And I just mentioned all that because when taking this money right now in the hand, it should not be to reinstall what had been before. It should look forward and to have this focus on this very job-intensive care jobs. Care jobs are job-intensive. They are needed because we need them, absolutely, more than producing cars that nobody needs in this way anymore. And of course, this is something so important for women. And honestly, I'm not informed exactly how health programs do look like in Latin America, if it's the World Bank or whoever has to take this on board as well when offering support, or it has to be done within the own national budget. But I can only recommend it to every finance minister, the economy minister. I even don't talk about the ministers being responsible for female affairs, but those who would like to do the best for the recovery of the economy and to do something for the future and to do something for the climate, to do this sort of gender mainstreaming, to look what does it mean, because it's job intensive. And then of course, when it's job intensive, it's good for all of us. It's good for the economy as well. So I just have to, insofar to be straightforward, I don't know exactly how it looks like in Costa Rica right now, if it's the national budget or it has to go via the global financing institutions. But if, then they have to take exactly this on board. And I just say, I never stop to mention it, that care is a key to going for jobs in care, that this is a key for the future of all of us, and not only when we have a panel on talking about informal care work. It's good for all of us.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. Then we close this first panel, and I will give the floor to Maria Manuel, who will run and moderate the second one. Thank you very much.
Thank you again for all the participants. Obrigada, Juliana, pela tua participação. Aceitaremos o teu convite. Estaremos no Brasil para ver contigo tudo aquilo que nos falaste hoje. Muito obrigada por teres participado. Conta connosco deste lado, na tua luta desse lado, que é a nossa luta também, como pudeste ver, e espero tenhas percebido, os problemas são parecidos, os nossos recursos são maiores, mas estamos aqui para te ajudar. Muito, muito obrigada pela tua participação. Thank you, Evelyn, for the participation. Now I'm going to move to the second panel on the important issue of domestic violence and health. It's my pleasure to be here to moderate this discussion. We know data is still being collected, but we know that COVID-19 has had a mostly negative impact both on domestic violence and health. Preliminary data paint a worrisome picture. Calls on domestic violence hotlines have increased around Europe, 20% in Lithuania, 30% in Cyprus, 32% in France, 47% in Spain are some of the numbers we have, unfortunately, to share with all of you. This may become even worse as the risk of widespread recession and job losses will increase tensions at home and make women more vulnerable and dependent. And what about health? When public health emergencies appear, regular healthcare needs are left behind to deal with urgent care needs of those infected all over our countries. However, this balance once again has damaged women's rights and health. The limitation in access family planning or abortion care, to give only some two examples, will cause lasting damage to women. Also, there is not much evidence yet for the impact of COVID-19. We know from previous crises such as Ebola in West Africa that this is the case. This impact will succeed, will be clear. Due to the lockdown requirements, some women have been unable to visit healthcare providers to access contraceptives, including emergency contraception. Furthermore, the costs of these services may be prohibitive for those who are facing economic insecurity as a consequence of the crisis. And think on abortion. Abortion is time sensitive, and delay can lead to worse outcomes or women's seeking unsafe methods. Again, these impacts may be particularly severe for those of low income with disabilities and marginalized women. All of these topics are linked together, compounded by the risk of sexual and gender-based violence associated with quarantine. Last but not least, as Evelyn referred before, there have been widespread attempts, both in European Union and Latin America, to use COVID-19 as a coverage for political decision to restrict women's rights and access to healthcare. To make it worse, this may then be further compromised by prohibition to protest or launch collective action to protect these rights, as Evelyn referred in the case of Poland. The debate of all those issues, we have to debate all those issues. We have today with us Jimena Lopez, an Argentinian politician that was with us in the parliament, invited by Monica Silvana some months ago, that is member of the party Frente Renovador and currently serving as a national deputy for the province of Buenos Aires. And Asha Allen, thank you both, a policy and campaign officer for the European Women's Lobby, where she coordinates specific areas of the organization's work, such as the eradication of all forms of violence against women. Thank you, Jimena. Thank you, Asha, to be with us. Jimena, the floor is yours. La palabra es tuya.
Bueno, hola, buenas tardes. Acá en Argentina es un horario relativamente temprano. En principio quería agradecerles a todas y a todos, fundamentalmente al grupo de la Alianza Progresista de Socialistas y Demócratas del Parlamento Europeo, a mi querida compañera Mónica Silvana González, que fue quien me convocó, quien siempre está en contacto desde el Parlamento con Argentina. Realmente es un puente de lujo que tenemos desde Argentina para con el Parlamento. Bueno, y a vos, de violencia de género que se da en el marco de la pandemia del COVID-19 en Argentina y los números que se están manejando y cómo impactó. Obviamente parto de la base de que la pandemia lo que hizo en Argentina fue poner de relevancia la fragilidad que dejaron 4 años de políticas neoliberales con un nivel de pobreza que ya venía en aumento, las infancias realmente muy vulnerabilizadas y las situaciones de violencia que lo que hicieron en relación a la pandemia fue ponerse en el centro de la cuestión de la forma más cruel, con el aumento del número de femicidios que tuvimos de compañeras, alcanzando picos de un femicidio cada 22 horas, y obviamente la cercanía del asesino y los contextos en donde fueron feminizadas las víctimas. Desde ese lugar compartí una pantalla que yo no la estoy pudiendo ver, pero bueno, voy a tratar de hablar del impacto de la violencia doméstica y la salud. Particularmente, bueno, nosotros acá en Argentina hablamos de violencia de género, que tiene que ver por la condición de mujer o de identidad feminizada que tiene la víctima. En lo que va del año, nosotros iniciamos un proceso de aislamiento social en la Argentina a partir del mes de marzo, una semana después de que nuestros hijos e hijas empezaran el ciclo escolar. Se decretó por el Poder Ejecutivo, nuestro presidente, un aislamiento social preventivo y obligatorio que implicó una nueva modalidad de relación para poder aplanar en algún punto la curva del COVID. Desde ese momento a la fecha, desde enero hasta el 31 de octubre de este mes que pasó, llevamos lamentablemente 255 compañeras asesinadas. Esto es de un observatorio que se llama Ahora que sí nos ven. La mayoría obviamente tenía un vínculo con el agresor, porque para poder asesinar a una mujer básicamente tiene que haber un ambiente de cercanía. Generalmente el agresor obviamente es una pareja o expareja en el 65% casi de los casos. El 65% de los asesinatos de los femicidios ocurrieron en el domicilio de la víctima. Lo que suponemos que hemos analizado con el Ministerio de Mujeres, Géneros y Diversidades de la Argentina es que tiene que ver obviamente con que el contexto de aislamiento que tuvimos que pasar por el COVID-19, lo que hizo fue en algún punto acortar la duración de los ciclos de la violencia, recrudeciendo esas situaciones y generando obviamente los peores desenlaces para estas mujeres. El 24% de estas mujeres fueron asesinadas a golpes, el resto después con uso de arma de fuego y uso de arma blanca. Y lo que se implementó o lo que se mejoró en esta pandemia fue la línea 144, que es una línea de ayuda que se la dotó de un nuevo sistema de software, lo cual implicó una inversión desde el Estado y nueva capacitación de operadores y operadoras para la recepción de las llamadas. En lo que va de la pandemia hubo más de 53.000 llamadas pidiendo determinados tipos de intervenciones, que van desde un asesoramiento hasta la posibilidad de sacar a una víctima de su domicilio por el nivel de violencia en el que se encontraba y las posibilidades de no sobrevivir de esa mujer. El Ministerio de Mujeres, Géneros y Diversidad señala que hay un 20% de aumento en relación a las denuncias de años anteriores, teniendo un promedio de 250 llamadas por día. Pensemos que es una línea de llegada a nivel nacional y que Argentina, en relación a los temas de género y al abordaje de la misma, tenemos una geografía sumamente heterogénea y conviven diferentes realidades culturales a lo largo y ancho de nuestro país. El 98% de las llamadas fueron realizadas por mujeres, y dentro de ese universo de las mujeres tenemos las adolescentes, las mujeres adultas jóvenes, las embarazadas, pero es cierto que del universo de personas violentadas, la mayoría son mujeres o identidades feminizadas. Por eso decimos que es una cuestión que requiere un abordaje del Estado en clave de políticas públicas preventivas y también reparatorias desde lo judicial. Obviamente los agresores siempre o en general son parejas o exparejas. Y desde la Oficina de Violencia Doméstica, que depende de lo que es Poder Judicial, es una oficina que funciona durante 24 horas, inclusive los fines de semana y feriados, que hace atención directa con la víctima. Tuvieron 174.000 presentaciones por hechos de violencia doméstica. Yo prefiero seguir hablando de violencia de género, pero es un término que utiliza esa oficina judicial, y el 11% ya había tenido algún tipo de denuncia previa. Volvemos a lo mismo. Todo lo que tiene que ver con violencia de género se pone de relevancia que las más afectadas son las mujeres. Y por ahí tomo el diagnóstico que realizó la compañera Juliana de Brasil, en esto de que somos las mujeres las que estamos más vulnerabilizadas en relación al trabajo, a las condiciones de salud, a que fuimos quienes ocupamos las primeras líneas en relación al COVID desde el sistema sanitario, desde los servicios esenciales, desde inclusive la posibilidad de seguir sosteniendo en esta nueva realidad que es virtual el sistema educativo de los países de América Latina. Los casos atendidos, bueno, tienen derivaciones a lo que es justicia civil en el 98% de los casos, la justicia penal que también intervino, que tiene que ver con la denuncia que hace la víctima para tomar medidas de protección o cuando ya estamos hablando de algún tipo de agresión física con algún tipo de modalidad, el asesoramiento jurídico, los servicios de salud, que también tomo esta situación que se vivió en el marco de la pandemia con aquellos servicios que tenían que ver con la salud sexual y reproductiva de las mujeres. Argentina sigue teniendo, más allá del contexto de la pandemia, la deuda histórica de la legalización del aborto, y es cierto que los servicios de salud sexual se vieron en algún punto resentidos porque era muy difícil que durante los primeros meses que se decretó el aislamiento, las mujeres que tenían algún tipo de violencia en su casa o que sufrían o padecen violencia sexual, se animaran a acercarse a los efectores por esta cuestión que se había construido en un momento como de mucho control social, que después el mismo presidente desestimó y dijo que quienes estén padeciendo violencia tienen el derecho a salir de su vivienda para pedir, obviamente, ayuda, para pedir la intervención judicial. Trato de ser breve en la explicación, porque bueno, creo que es un espacio para para compartir lo que pasa en los diferentes países. Es cierto que en Argentina en diciembre cambió el gobierno, tuvimos por primera vez Ministerio de las Mujeres, Géneros y Diversidades a nivel nacional, a nivel provincial, que este año nuestro presupuesto, que fue sancionado la semana pasada, tiene perspectiva de género, destinando más de 3,6 billones a políticas públicas con perspectiva de género. Y también es cierto que, si bien la pandemia obviamente trajo una nueva modalidad de vida para todos y para todas, no es menos cierto que aquellas personas y grupos de población que ya estaban fragilizadas, que ya estaban vulnerabilizadas, la pandemia lo único que trajo fue el empeoramiento de su situación. La convivencia con los agresores en las mujeres termina en la muerte, y eso es algo que los gobiernos y todos y todas que tenemos la potestad de lograr alguna modificación en la vida cotidiana de las personas tenemos que entender. La violencia tiene que dejar de cobrarse vidas de compañeras que están embarazadas de las formas más crueles. Entonces Argentina está en un proceso de una profunda transformación en relación a sus políticas públicas. Para mí ha sido un placer estar acá, trato de respetar el tiempo que me dieron para que todas puedan, para que podamos hacer un intercambio. Yo agradezco, les vuelvo a agradecer la invitación, les vuelvo a agradecer haber estado en Bélgica y haber podido llevar la voz de la legalización del aborto, que es algo que queremos discutir antes de que termine el año. Muchísimas gracias a todos y a todas, y obviamente a disposición.
Thank you, Ximena. Gracias, Ximena, por todo, por tu participación y por los datos que ha compartido con nosotras, que son muy importantes. Van a estar conosco en YouTube para todos y todas que quieran partilhar y compartir los datos. Thank you, Ximena, for your participation in this debate and for the data you share with us that are so important to better understand the situation in Latin America and to compare with the situation in Portugal. And congratulations for the work you are doing in the parliament and also in the government in order to improve women's situation in Argentina. And now I'm going to give the floor to Asha Allen. And thank you, Asha, to be with us. I'm sorry because we are speaking in Spanish, in Portuguese, in English, but we are doing always for to improve our life and the women's right. The floor is yours, Asha.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to the organisers for the invitation. I will continue to speak in English to follow the flow of the presentations so far. So as warmly welcomed, my name is Asha Allen. I'm a Policy and Campaigns Officer at the European Women's Lobby. We are the largest umbrella organisation of women's civil society in Europe. So we count on over 2,000 member organisations across Europe, across some of the accession states, as well as some of the EFTA countries as well. So we estimate around about 15 million women we represent, but we haven't counted every single one, so you can't quote me on that number specifically. In regards to our work, we've been working in Europe for over 30 years, and this discussion is so important because I think the thing to really emphasize right now is that the pandemic is still ongoing and the crisis is still ongoing. We are still in the midst of what is happening at this moment in time. And it was our members, their expertise and their work on the ground that really informs the work and the data that we have been collecting. Many of our members of whom actually work in solidarity with our sister organizations in Latin America. So thank you also for opening this space for this mutual discussion. As I mentioned, we counted on their expertise and their knowledge to comprehensively map what was happening on the ground very early on in the crisis, and we continue to do so. So as of April this year, we were able to publish a comprehensive policy brief that outlined the experiences of women in the midst of the crisis and what was happening. And we concretely looked at the consequences on women's health, of which we are talking about right now, the socioeconomic circumstances of women, which we talked about previously, and I thank our colleagues for having that particular particular discussion. We also looked on the impact of democracy and democratic participation, and I think many of those situations that we potentially foresaw arising are now arising in some EU member states and across Europe and across Latin America as well. And of course, we focused on what would happen in the context of violence against women and girls in the midst of this crisis. And we're clearly having a shared experience with our sisters in Latin America and globally in regards to the consequences and how this impact is disproportionately impacting on women. And I think that's very, very clear from the data that we've presented and some of the information that I'll provide today. I'll focus first on health, and I think it's clear that women were at the forefront of the EU and the global response to the health crisis. Over 70% of frontline and essential workers in Europe were women. These were the people who kept our societies, our economies, and our communities growing. Yet still, women were still disproportionately impacted negatively by this crisis, despite propping up our societies. From a perspective of health, what we saw were the results of years of austerity measures and the lack of investment in our healthcare systems, and what that led to became very, very evident quite clearly. For us, we looked at the impact on women in all of their diversity, and we particularly saw the impact on older women who represent more than half of the EU's population in terms of those over the age of 60. Over 19 million older women in Europe live alone. And if you take into consideration the contexts of confinement and the restrictions of the pandemic, that left them particularly vulnerable to what was happening during the peak of the crisis in March, and as it continues to go on right now. But many of those who weren't living alone were living in under-resourced long-term care facilities, and it may be shared with the experience with our sisters in Latin America, but many of those in those care facilities were particularly exposed to contracted COVID-19 and having health complications around that too. And for those who were fortunate enough not to be in that particular situation, they faced even further hurdles with disruption to routine health services that they relied upon, and in not being able to obtain the medicine that they needed throughout the entire process. But it wasn't just older women that we looked at too. I just wanted to highlight their particular experience and really bring an intersectional perspective to the discussion today. But our members were also able to inform us very, very quickly of the increasing difficulties that women were facing in accessing adequate healthcare. And Maria had mentioned this already in her opening, particularly regarding sexual reproductive health and rights and care in that particular region. What we saw was that women were experiencing difficulties in accessing contraception, in accessing abortion care, and there were some good practices that came out of this, and I will talk about that in a moment. But of course, the issues continue and they remain. I think one of the aspects that we've seen when it comes to reproductive health care are the measures that a lot of states took in regards to preventing mothers and those engaged in those who were about to give birth, of course, preventing fathers and other close relatives from being able to be present during childbirth, and having adequate aftercare as well. So women continue to face difficulties as a consequence of this crisis, particularly on health. But I know that this discussion is looking very much at domestic violence, and I wanted to move to that particular aspect. But I just wanted to do this from a very holistic perspective and recognize that domestic violence and cases of intimate partner violence are part of the continuum of violence against women. And so what we were able to see and map very quickly, unfortunately very early on, is that we saw an increase in all forms of violence against women and girls. And this was an increase of the risk that young women faced in regards to FGM, female genital mutilation, honor-based violence, incest, online violence. There was an increase all round in regards to the level of violence that women and girls were facing in Europe. But particularly looking at domestic violence and cases of intimate partner violence, of course, lockdown and the isolation measures that were created an enabling environment for abusers and perpetrators of violence against women. Women were confined at home or in institutional settings, and this meant that they were more apparently in regards to more exposed, to coercive control and physical control. This led to more incidences of physical, psychological, and sexual violence, and women experienced less possibilities of being able to actually seek help without further endangering themselves during the lockdown periods. What our mapping revealed in some of the countries is that there were similar trends, but also interesting trends that where more data is required. Some of the data has been shared already, but I just take this moment to share some more with you. In France, the Ministry of Interior indicated an increase of reports of domestic violence of between 32 and 36% in just Paris alone, and this was by April of this year. Our members, some of whom are direct service providers, so really grassroots organizations on the ground helping women and providing the services they need. One particular member in Ireland reported a 5-fold increase in domestic violence orders being sought in their region. So that's a 5 times increase, and that was by April again. In Lithuania, another very sad and unfortunate example, femicide cases had already doubled in 2020 compared to the previous year by April, by the publication of this particular policy brief that we'd done. So what we were seeing was across Europe and across the member states, there was clearly an increase. But what we also saw was another interesting factor, was that in some countries, there was actually a decrease in reporting. And this was in Italy, in the Netherlands, and Portugal, and Estonia. But what our members were able to indicate very, very quickly was that this wasn't a decrease in the experiences of domestic violence or intimate partner violence. What this were extra hurdles, that women were not able to use the reporting mechanisms, helplines, and access to services that they would have had before. So that also indicates that there may have been an increase to the violence that women were experiencing and continue to experiencing during this COVID pandemic. We've talked quite a bit about the data already, so I wanted to take this moment to share with you some of the good practices that we actually saw and that we commended over this period. And I really want to reinforce those because they need to be furthered and they need to be continued. And I really want to channel what Evelyn was saying earlier in regards to talking about solutions and what we could work on collectively. Women's specialized services face many challenges, of course, in regards to increased demand and limited resources. And some governments responded, whereas others sadly continued the trend that we've seen over the last few years in the decrease of funding and the shrinking of civil society space that is so desperately needed and to be able to help all women and girls in Europe. But some examples of good practices that we have from some European countries, in Austria, for example, very early on, there was an expansion of financial support for women and girls affected by violence in the times of the crisis. In Spain, we saw that services for support and protection of victims of male violence were declared an essential service. And this was vital in ensuring that the shelters were able to run and have the support that we need. We also saw some
2 minutes, Asha, please.
Sure. We also saw some innovative solutions. One organization in Italy called Telefona Rosa developed a special app that allowed women to be able to report what was happening without having to call a helpline. So if you imagine they were in a situation where they were able to report without indicating that that's what they were doing, and several governments initiated campaigns to stress the importance of access to helplines. So we saw some very, very great political initiatives, and what that highlights is that where there is political will and the prioritization of women's safety, women can be protected from violence, and there can be some better protection mechanisms. So I would just like to finish by saying that what we've highlighted, and I think what our sisters in Latin America have highlighted too, is that women in Europe are experiencing different levels of protection in regards from violence and prevention of violence. And what this really urgently highlights is that there's a need for a coordinated EU action. At the European Women's Lobby, we call for access and ensure all health services, both existing and emergency measures, are regularized, and provided safely and based on principles of non-discrimination. We call for the urgent ratification and implementation of the Istanbul Convention by all EU member states and the EU, and the adoption of a comprehensive legal framework to combat and prevent all forms of violence against women, which would also include an EU directive that we know that the European Parliament has been calling for many, many years, that adopts an intersectional approach to ending all forms of violence against women. So this would be our demands, and I'm very happy to take any questions and continue the discussion on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Asha. Very important suggestions and also examples and numbers. Concerning Portugal, as far as I know, I can assure you is a decrease because we have reinforced our lines, our hotlines, and our tools to support women in this case during the crisis. But it's very important to know how the data are being collected in different countries, because maybe as in health, we are using different criteria to collect the data, and it's very important to have standards also in data related to women. Now we are going to open the debate for some minutes. Vamos a abrir el debate por unos minutos. And so I give the floor to Monica Silvana and after Mark. And thank you both to be with us again. Mónica, la palabra es tuya. Puedes hablar en español. Castellano.
Thank you, María Manuel. Muchas gracias, María Manuel. Muy breve, solamente para felicitar la organización de este evento. Cuando estuvimos en Panamá, en Eurolat, vimos la necesidad de construir una agenda feminista dentro de Eurolat, y quién mejor que nuestra coordinadora, nuestra coordinación desde la familia de Lesandí, y por lo tanto, gracias por organizar esto. Evelyn, por supuesto, Jimena desde Buenos Aires, Aya del Lobby Europeo de Mujeres, Evelyn, presidenta de la Comisión de FEM. Muchas gracias por organizar esto. Creo que Latinoamérica vive un momento crucial. Se acaban de celebrar las elecciones constituyentes en Chile, el próximo año elecciones en Ecuador, las pasadas elecciones de Bolivia. Por lo tanto, necesitamos construir desde Eurolat una agenda feminista donde podamos impulsar los cambios necesarios que Latinoamérica necesita, y que podamos también compartir las experiencias de los parlamentos latinoamericanos en Europa. La pandemia que vivimos no conoce de fronteras, pero sí conoce de diferencias sociales y discrimina por el acceso a la educación, el acceso al agua potable, el acceso a la seguridad alimentaria que tienen. Por lo tanto, gracias por organizar este evento. Seguimos trabajando juntas, seguimos construyendo una agenda feminista, y gracias a los compañeros hombres que se solidarizan y que se prestan a trabajar juntos. Gracias a Javi López, Mar Ángel y todos los compañeros conectados, Iván y todo el resto de compañeros que están conectados construyendo juntos esta agenda. Muchas gracias,
Mónica. Gracias, Mónica. And Mark, the floor is yours. And thanks again to be with us.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Feminist men, that's not a problem. We need more of them, but also feminist women. So we are all in the same boat. So anyway, I would like to thank our two speakers, Jimena and also Asha, for their excellent presentations. And I wanted to it's really scary to hear that all forms of violence are raising during COVID. And so I have a few questions to Asha. And I want to thank the excellent work the European Women's Lobby does. So my first question would be: did you notice that after when things reopened after confinement, that this violence has continued, that it had become like a habit, and that it continued now into the second wave, or was it really linked to the confinement? That would be my first question. Or is there a risk that it will continue even if COVID is over, that these are habits, that these men who became violent, that there's like a taboo broken? My second question would be Commissioner Dalli presented the gender equality strategy on March 5th, just before COVID. And do you think it should be revised a bit, that there should be a post-COVID chapter added to that? Because are there enough answers to address the problems you have risen in this gender strategy? Because you mentioned that we need a coordinated EU action. This strategy is a coordinated EU action, but is it enough or not? That would be my second question. And the last question, do you think that the European Union does enough in its external action in dealing with gender issues? They do a lot on gender, I know, but also on the violence and health, access to health for women. Are we doing enough as Europeans in our external action? Thank you very much.
Mark, and now I give the floor to Alba. Alba? It's Alba.
Yes.
Alba Gonzalez. Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you
We
very
cannot
much.
see you, but you can hear. Te estamos escuchando, no te estamos viendo, pero puedes hablar. Ahora sí.
Gracias. Thank you very much also for this event. So my name is Alba Gonzalez and I'm working in Solidar. We work on the advancement of economic and social rights. So there was a question before, what are our civil society doing with this crisis and to support women in the region? So in our case, we conducted a series of analysis, and what we saw is what it was highlighted already, that this pandemic has only highlighted the needs that they were already there for women in the region, meaning protection against violence towards them, access to health and education. So one of the things I wanted to raise here is that one of the consequences is that civil society in some countries of Latin America were the ones giving the protection to those women, to women receiving this violence. But now with the COVID situation, it's been very difficult for civil society also to provide that protection to women. So here I think the EU could do more, both on protecting the role of civil society and the role of organization of women fighting for women's rights in the region. And one other comment I wanted to raise here is that because of climate change, we don't know how many pandemics we will have in the future. We don't know what is going to be the consequences of climate change. So I think we need to go for very sustainable measures that take into consideration the rights of women, but also, in connection with environment's rights. And there are very nice examples of our colleagues in Latin America. So I think it's also one thing that we can learn from them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alba. And now I give the floor to Rosa.
Hi.
Hi. Rosa.
Hi. Yes. Well, my name is Rosa, and I am working for the EULAT network as a policy officer. So first of all, I would like to thank you for this interesting event that you have organized, and also thank you for interesting speakers. We have now recently published a document, a policy brief with specific recommendations to the European Union to promote gender equality in Latin America and in Europe. And I would like to share that with you. I will share it with a link in the chat. Many of our recommendations to the European Union relate to gender mainstreaming to all external policies and cooperation programs. And we call for more transparency and access to information for civil society organizations. And in this sense, I would like to ask the panel, how can the European Union ensure the participation of civil society, including women's organizations, feminist movements from the two regions, in implementation, in the monitoring of the different policies, like, for instance, in the joint communication for the relations of the EU with Latin America, or in the new EU Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy, or the next Gender Action Plan. And finally, I would like to make a comment, is that for EU Latin Network, we are especially concerned about the situation of women human rights defenders, because they face an increased risk of harassment, attacks, sexual violence, among others. And therefore, we encourage the European Parliament to call on the European Union to adopt an annex to the already existing EU guidelines for human rights defenders, but with specific gender recommendations. So thank you very much.
For your important intervention, and thank you for sharing with us this link to some information that can be useful for all of us, for our colleagues from Latin America, and of course for our work in the Parliament and all the civil society organizations that today are with us. Now I'm going to give the floor for 1 minute to Maria Jimena Lopez to answer or to comment the comments from our colleagues, if she wants. María, la palabra es tuya, y después voy a dar la palabra a Asha and close this debate and move to the concluding remarks. Thank you.
Sí, entendí algunas cuestiones, yo por ahí tengo, el inglés me cuesta más. Creo que la última pregunta tenía que ver con la implementación de programas. Si alguno de los que preguntó me puede repetir en castellano, me sería más fácil. Algo entendí que tenía que ver más que nada con los programas que se han implementado. En relación a lo que es Argentina particularmente, se está trabajando todo lo que es violencia de género desde una planificación en el mediano y largo plazo. Es una planificación armada desde el Ministerio. Nosotros anteriormente teníamos lo que se llamaba el Consejo de la Mujer, que en algún punto se jerarquizó a través de la creación de un ministerio con presupuesto propio. Esa planificación en contra de las violencias hacia los géneros involucra diferentes líneas de abordaje que tiene que ver obviamente con un acompañamiento temprano a quienes padecen las situaciones de violencia para evitar que las mismas se recrudezcan, y obviamente todo un soporte económico. Es muy difícil para las víctimas de la violencia, mujeres e identidades feminizadas, nosotros también consideramos a las compañeras travesti trans dentro de este universo, poder en algún punto cortar el vínculo con el agresor si no tiene un soporte económico que le asegure la vivienda, que le asegure un trabajo, y desde ese lugar se han pensado diferentes formas de subsidios sostenidas a lo largo del tiempo para que la persona pueda, si está fragilizada en su trabajo, generarse herramientas o generar herramientas de capacitación para ingresar al mundo laboral. Si tiene trabajo, poder sostenerlo, sobre todo porque una de las cuestiones que se evalúa en aquellas víctimas que provienen de sectores populares es la imposibilidad de contar con lugares de cuidado, que también es un gran tema en el que se está avanzando en Argentina, para dejar a sus hijos e hijas. Después creo que entendí una de las preguntas relacionadas con las masculinidades o los varones. Cualquier cosa me vuelven a preguntar, es más o menos lo que yo comprendí de la pregunta.
Jimena, ¿cómo vamos a empoderar, cómo vamos a incrementar la participación de la sociedad civil en las relaciones euro-latinoamericanas? Es una
¿Cómo vamos a incrementar la participación? Bueno, ustedes saben que Argentina ha generado las condiciones para lo que se llaman las democracias paritarias. Es cierto que tenemos una deuda aún con las mujeres en relación a la participación política, sobre todo a la ocupación de cargos de decisión. Creo que hay que tender puentes entre ambos parlamentos que impliquen una forma colaborativa en relación a los avances que ustedes han tenido en materia de género y que nosotras recién estamos transitando, si bien hace muchos años que ya venimos las feministas con el reconocimiento de las luchas. Es cierto que es la primera vez que tenemos la posibilidad de asignaciones reales de recursos para trabajar. es muy difícil hablar de violencia de género y no pensar que para frenarla se necesitan recursos humanos y materiales.
Cierto. Sí, y muchos. Gracias, Jimena, por tu participación. Y ahora I'll give the floor to Asha for a minute, only to some final remarks to this debate. And thank you again for your participation, Asha. We hope we can work together in the future in these subjects and others we can.
Thank you very much, and I'll try and be as quick as I can to cover the questions that were posed. In regards to the collection of data and the situation of women ongoing, we haven't had any indications to say the situation has improved, but we also haven't had any other opportunities for concrete data collection. And I think what needs to be highlighted here is how much there has been a dependency on women's civil society to do that data collection, when actually there should be mechanisms, especially under states that have ratified the Istanbul Convention, to do that data collection. And so there's a need in the EU to have uniform standards and similar indicators to make sure that we understand what is happening in Europe comprehensively, and that the data that we have is useful to look at things from a European level. On the gender equality strategy, we very much welcome this at the European Women's Lobby, and we had been waiting for quite some time for a gender equality strategy. We did not have one during the last term of the college, and we were very, very enthused by its commitment to violence against women, which is one of the two core main pillars that it has in there, and its commitment to try and drive forward the Istanbul Convention ratification, but also the more recent commitments of President Ursula von der Leyen on actually bringing forward EU measures and much more comprehensive measures and mechanisms on ending violence against women. And so what we would say here very quickly is that this strong political commitment needs to be supported by legislative frameworks. That's the only way that this is going to be impactful for women on the ground, and to have effective implementation. And just very lastly, and maybe just my final point here in regards to ensuring that women's civil society participate in the process. Effective implementation and changing the lives of women on the ground cannot happen without women's civil society. They bring the expertise, they could bring the trainings, they are some of the service providers, they bring the feminist analysis, and they can engage in the impartial monitoring and evaluation that is needed to make sure that the frameworks that we have on the ground are effectively implemented. And in this current environment, I think you mentioned it earlier already, Mark, women's civil society have been increasingly under attack. There's a shrinking civil society space, and we need to make sure that all of our activists and all civil society is concretely, sustainably funded and supported by our political mechanisms and political decision makers. So thank you very much for inviting me to the discussion, and I'm happy to work with any of you after this and moving forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Asha. I totally agree with you. It's very important to empower civil society, and in the Parliament we are doing our best in order to empower civil society and to work in a very, very close collaboration with you and all civil society in order to have not only better policy but more effective policy to change reality. We policy in books is very nice, but we want politics in action in order to change reality. Thank you for your participation, and I hope to see you in Brussels or to work with you in a virtual way. So I'm going to move to the concluding remarks, and I would like to empiezo agradeciendo, now I'm going to speak in Spanish and to conclude in Spanish. Empiezo agradeciendo a todos los participantes, Irache, Javi, Evelyn, Juliana, Jimena, Asha, Ima, Mark, Mónica, Mark Angel y los demás. Rosa compartió con nosotras un importante link. Also Ambassador Sergio Alfaro de Costa Rica, Alba y todos y todas que estuvieron con nosotras. Graças também ao secretariado, em especial a Pilar Ruiz Elmano, Maria Guisens e Giorgio Cardoso, por seu incansável apoio na organização deste debate. Tudo parece simples, mas tudo é muito difícil antes de começar. Como mencionou Irache em suas palavras iniciais, 25 anos depois de Pequim, os avanços em igualdade de género han sido muito pequenos. Necesitamos políticas públicas fuertes, como nos han dicho todos los participantes, y también de un fuerte empeño de la sociedad civil por una perspectiva de género en todas las políticas públicas y no solamente en aquellas que son más dirigidas para las mujeres y para las minorías. Sabemos por otras crisis que el impacto económico en las mujeres suele ser más severo que en los hombres, porque las mujeres ocupan los trabajos más precarios, los primeros a desaparecer, son peor remuneradas y a menudo retiran parte de sus ingresos de actividades informales. Y lo sabemos que los trabajadores informales son los más vulnerables, que no son beneficiarios de ninguna forma de protección social. La crisis COVID-19 também impacta a América Latinoamérica em meio da maior crise migratória de sua história. Entre 2016 e 2019, quase 4,5 milhões de venezuelanos abandonaram o país e, ao mesmo tempo, milhares de pessoas saíram de Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, rumbo ao México e os Estados Unidos, e desde Nicaragua hacia Costa Rica e Panamá. Los migrantes, las mujeres migrantes y los migrantes son especialmente afectadas por las consecuencias económicas del virus, debido a que muchos de ellos viven en hogares y condiciones sanitarias muy precarias. Y en esta crisis se hicieron más visibles otras desigualdades que discutíamos en el Parlamento, a saber, la falta de competencias digitales que dificulta la vida cotidiana de muchas mujeres y en general impide su acceso a trabajos más cualificados. Necesitamos introducir y mejorar las plataformas de aprendizaje digital existentes, como han hecho algunos países de la región y también en Europa. O el desequilibrio, la distribución de las tareas de cuidado. Evelyn ha hablado muy de este punto que para nosotros es muy importante, el cuidado de los niños o de los ancianos, las tareas del hogar en general. 2 números solamente. En México, el trabajo no pago de las mujeres es 6 horas y 23 minutos para 2 horas y 17 minutos de los hombres. Y en Portugal, el trabajo no pago de las mujeres es 5 horas y 28 minutos por las mujeres contra 1 hora y 36 minutos por los hombres. Lo doy 2 ejemplos de mi país y del México que no son muy buenos ejemplos. Necesitamos de medidas discriminatorias positivas que aborden estas desigualdades y nos dejen a las mujeres, que nos dejen a las mujeres peor que antes de la crisis. Necesitamos de reforzar nuestra lucha en varias frentes que van desde las competencias del futuro, como las digitales, hasta el cambio de la cultura del pasado, que subyace a la sobrecarga de las mujeres con los deberes de cuidado, lo que es la base de mucha desigualdad personal y profesional. Lo peor de todo es que la crisis ha agravado aún más la violencia doméstica, que era una gran preocupación antes en varios países europeos y latinoamericanos, así como los derechos sexuales y reproductivos, que vemos sufrir algunos retrocesos en lugar de avances. Los gobiernos y los académicos deben trabajar con las organizaciones sociales de la sociedad civil para comprender estas tendencias y los impactos, los contextos cambiantes y las medidas y las dinámicas sociopolíticas. Necesitamos más datos desagregados por sexo para comprenderlos. Para averiguarlo, son necesarias metodologías cualitativas también, como entrevistas a mulheres que han sido afetadas por la violencia, líderes comunitários, provedores de atenção médica, para capturar histórias das afetadas, cujas experiências podem não ser evidentes em las estadísticas oficiais. Necessitamos também de implicar as mulheres em todas as fases da resposta, em la toma de decisões nacionais e locais. Em Europa e em Latinoamérica, estamos atentas e disponíveis para pelear esta luta e juntas procurar as soluções e respostas rápidas e efetivas. Em vésperas de uma Assembleia Parlamentar Paritária Eurolat, amanhã e depois, queríamos fazer este debate para que amanhã e depois a situação da mulher seja visível na discussão que vamos a ter. Estou segura de que nossos copresidentes de Eurolat, Javi López e Pizarro, uno deles, Javi, aqui presente, não lo olvidarão. Por mi parte, como coordinadora del grupo de socialistas y demócratas en Eurolat y en nombre de todas y todos mis compañeros y mis compañeras, les aseguro que esto es una gran prioridad para nosotras y para nosotros. Gracias a todas y a todos por su participación. Thank you very much. Obrigada. Estamos juntas. Together and safe.
Yes.